Okay, so the next step is getting the top plate of the dirty frame ready for assembly. And we're gonna need these here. There's 4 V2 bobbins and the 4 standoffs and the M3 6mm. These have been polished already and these have been cleaned with alcohol. Now when we look at this plate, at first glance it looks like it's symmetrical from back to end, but in fact these holes are different. And to verify what's front and back, we're going to need the bottom plate of the clean frame. So slip that under the bottom plate, and you're going to pay attention to these big holes right there and the little one that's next to it. And we're going to try to line them up. And we look at that, and we can see through the top 2. But when we look at the bottom, you can't see through them. You can't see the hole. So this is actually flipped. So we want to take that and rotate it. So now, when we have the top holes lined up, the bottom ones also as well. And that's very important because this is the front and that's the back, because we've already gone and designated the motors and their direction. We need to conform to that, right? So this is a very important step. So with that alignment, drop it down. We don't need that plate anymore. And we want to take a masking tape, and I put it at the front. And we're going to draw an arrow. So from now on, this is exactly the way. And when we look at the bottom plate and the arms, we know right away that motor 4 is on the top left. So these two will conform to each other. The inside hole of the pair is going to be for the aluminum standoff, and the outside hole of the pair is going to be for the bobbin. Now, you want to install the aluminum one first because they actually sit quite close, and you're going to need to be able to get the pliers in there to get a nice tight fit. The rubber elastic band tipped needle nose, and we'll tighten that in. Now next to it is going to sit our bobbin. Like that. So we're going to do the same for every side, and it's going to be the standoff in the inside and the bobbins on the outside. So we've got all 4 bobbins and all 4 aluminum standoff set. So now we're ready to install it on the dirty frame. We're going to need 2 6mm M3s for the 2 side standoffs, and we're going to need 12 nylon threaded lock nuts that comes in the kit. We're going to take the wires that's going to travel through the middle hole, and we're going to feed them through there, making sure it's not going to get crimped or snagged on anything. Especially watch for the carbon fiber frame. We have sanded it, but if you crimp down and it's going to bolt down on top of it, it will cut and you will have a short, and there's going to be smoke and it's not going to be pretty on your maiden. So watch, this is a very crucial step. So as you're lowering down the plate, pull up on the wires and make sure there's a free travel. And again, verify that your arrow is in the front of the epic, and line up the motor arm bolts. Don't push down right away. You're going to visually inspect to make sure there's no motor wires getting crimped. There's no ESC signal wires being crimped as well, and that everything has a free play. And when you've confirmed that, you can push down on the frame. The first 2 things we're going to attach is the 6mm M3 onto the side standoffs. And right now the whole plate is still uneven. It's sitting just on top of the bolts here, so we don't want to put that much pressure on these yet. Again, just to when you find resistance. Okay, then just pick an arm and finger tighten in just when it snags into the threads. The 3 M3 nylon threaded lock nuts. And when you verified that inside the channel there's no wire that's being stepped on or crimped, we're going to take our 5.5mm socket and we're going to tighten them in. And for now, because none of the other arms have the lock nuts, don't go too much, just to when you find resistance. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and do that for all of the arms, and then after that you're going to screw down these two and start progressively getting these tighter around, and that's done. You've mounted the top plate of the dirty frame. After it's all tightened in, all lock nuts, you're going to remove these again, apply thread lock, and screw them in for the final time. Okay, so we're now ready to move on to the clean frame. So this is the bottom plate for the clean frame, and you can try putting it on top of the dirty frame that we just finished assembling. And it sits on top of the bobbins, and these are stoppers that we put the oversized black washers on top, and it prevents, if there is a tear in the bobbin, for the two plates to, or the two frames to separate. It caps on top. Now the space in between here can be used for any electronics, such as the naze board. So I've gone ahead and I've soldered up a naze board to be undermounted, so the pins are on the bottom. And I've done it one step further where it minimizes the profile, and it's very thin because there are wires, as we know, that's coming out from the middle. So the thinner you can get your naze board, the better, so that you have clearance for those wires. So that's what I'm going to be using right there. For mounting the naze, we're going to be using a nylon screw and a nylon nut. And these are commonly sold for doing flight controller assemblies. Like that. And another set of nylon nuts. And there we go. So that naze is now ready for the connections. Okay, next we need 11 50mm aluminum standoffs and 13 6mm M3 button heads. And we're going to be attaching that to the bottom plate of the clean frame to get ready for the final assembly, where we're going to be mounting the top plate and the electronics inside. So let's get started. I've already polished these aluminums. Again, if you really want to, you can change them to any color by slipping on a heat shrink. And people have done that to change it to a black or a blue. I like this shiny metal. It plays really well with the two-tone on the T-motors, and I really like that. I've used the alcohol to clean the threads on these M3s, and okay, let's get started. Okay, so we've finished attaching all the metal standoffs, and it looks striking. I really love the polished aluminum working with the carbon fiber. And again, it really works well to carry the theme on the T-motors. Next, we are going to get ready for the LiPo. For this build, I'm using 4S 1800 milliamps. So it's going to sit on the back here, and the Velcro straps on the side. Now, a great thing about this V2 frame with the 50 millimeters, as you can see, there's so much room to play with. You can have the LiPo in the back here like this, but really, essentially, this whole space here can be used in the future for larger packs. So if you have really large packs, like height-wise or even length, you've got quite a lot of room, and as long as it works with your center of gravity, you can really set it up any way you like. And that's a pretty awesome thing. Coming from a V1 frame, which was a little bit limited in terms of the height and where the battery could sit, especially if you didn't undermount your NAS board. So this is quite the luxury. It's so high that you could even have your packs standing up on its side rather than having it flat on its back. So you've got two options for attaching LiPos onto the frame. You can use a Velcro strip that's on the frame and then one on the bottom of your pack. Or what I've been starting to do in a lot of my builds is I use foam. And it provides a really good traction with the surface of the LiPo, and we mount that permanently on the frame. And I really like that look, and it lets me be creative with even the color of foam and other details that we'll go into once we start this. So let's get some foam, we'll get the LiPo straps in, and let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna need a piece of foam that is 33 millimeters wide. And let's accommodate for a really long pack, right? So let's get pretty much this entire ruler, which is 152. So we'll cut a piece of foam. Now the heads of the nylon bolts from the NAS board, we're going to have to cut around to make that work. Okay, so we've got the strip. I chose black because it looks quite nice on the carbon fiber. And that's going to look quite nice. If you want to, because there's a contour shape here, sort of like a fishtail, you can mimic the design on this end. So using a trimming scissor, we can try to emulate that look. And I think that's going to be quite nice. Now next, we talked about the heads on these nylons. So we need to be able to cut these out. Now instead of trying to guess where they go, what you can do is just flip it over, line it up exactly how you want it, and push down on each head. And this way, you're making an indent of exactly where those heads go. So when we look at it, there we have our cutouts. Exactly, right? So using a scissor, curved Lexan cutting scissors are actually the best for doing these sort of little details. So we'll go ahead and we're going to cut out each of these spots for the nylon heads. Okay, so let's check that out. And I think that's going to be perfect. So you can either stick it down, or if you look in the back side, there's these cutouts, right? And as you know, once we take the backing off, these are going to be sticky. So if you want to take it one step further, you can check out my 2-minute quickie video. It has how to fill holes with foam. So you can do that, or you can just continue. I'm going to go ahead and make the cutouts to fill for here. Okay, so we've got the cutouts now for the underside, so we're ready for assembly. So we're going to first start with the black strip that the LiPo is going to sit on. So this is going to be first stuck on the top side of the frame. Okay. And like that. Now on the back side, remember there's the sticky adhesive, and that's why we've got the cutouts. So we'll attach these. It adds a fun color accent, and it showcases the cutouts. And it prevents the dirt from sticking onto the adhesive that's left behind. So yeah, now it's ready for a LiPo. So before that, we're going to add some LiPo straps. Now the kit comes with one. You can add a second one if you like, or change them out altogether for the ones that's coated in rubber. I've used these, and personally I don't have a problem with them. They work pretty well if you combine it with something like the foam. But you're going to need two of these, because one doesn't seem to hold as well, because when you have one strap, there's still a little bit of pivoting that can happen. So fortunately, you can see there's a second hole, well, a longer hole, so you can have two straps side by side. So get the opportunity, pick up another strap and put that there as well. And that's gonna just really place that on the frame. So for us to be able to put the clean frame onto the dirty frame, we need to get all the connections ready that's gonna be going into the naze board. So let's put the clean frame aside for now, and let's look closely at what we have to do. So I've gone ahead and remembered the secondary power line. You can do many things, because some people will be just running it to power a VTX, and a lot of the VTXs can take up to 4S, some even 6S. So you do not have to step it down. But other times when you're running devices like LED lights, you do need a 12 volt, like a 3S power. So it's, for me, a good idea to always do a 12 volt step down and using the Pualu. And I've already gone ahead and installed the headers, and the 4S power that's coming out of the LiPo wire is being put into this device. And out of here will be two sets, one going to LEDs and the other one powering the VTX. These are the signal and BEC wires for all four of the ESCs. But as we know, we only need one of the BECs. So we keep one with the three, the ground, the power, the signal, and the other ones we only need the white, the signal wire. Now, some people, when they do an installation, they're going to cut away the positive and ground wire for each of the ones that we don't need the BEC. But what happens is, if you ever want to do any ESC flashing in the future, it gets a little bit more difficult. So it's a good idea not to cut away all the wires. And I'll show you a method that I use to hook up the 4 ESCs to the naze. So let's start that. So if we look at the way the naze board has been soldered for this setup, we have the signal pins for the first 4 ESCs. Then on the 5th pin, we give the naze the 5-volt power that's required, and we ground it using the 6th pin. And it's been soldered in a way where they are on the same plane. So what we need to do is make new connectors that's going to have those, so we can plug in 2 connectors and everything will be done right. So first thing, we're going to go over and we are going to find the first signal pin. So we're going to look for the one, luckily we wrote the inscriptions, so we're going to look for number 1, and there it is. So to remove these wires, we lift up the plastic tab and we pull out the wire. So this is going to be ESC 1. So we're going to remove it from the rest of the bundle. So we get one of the blank ones and we plug it into the rightmost. Okay, and you heard it click there, so that's in now. Now what I'm going to do is, similarly to before, I'm going to etch 1, 2, and 3, so we don't get disorganized. Okay, so now we need to find the second ESC, which is here, and remove the signal wire in the same process. Removing it from the bundle, and we're going to insert it next to the first signal wire. And the click means that it's in. You can verify it by checking our etching. So we now need the third ESC signal wire. So really, depending on how you solder the pins on your naze, you can find creative ways to do this. If you follow the way I've done it, then you can follow this exactly. But this will give you an idea of making a new harness using what's there. Now, the advantage to doing this is that we haven't cut these off. If we have to do any programming, we just remove from this harness and plug it back into the one that we need to program. So this is a good way to do this. So this first connector is ready to plug in. So if we look at the 4th ESC, it's already set up. So we don't have to do any mods for this one. Okay, so let's plug these in. Number 4 is going in from the top. The new signal harness, make sure you check it. It's going right in next to it. Okay. Now above it, we have put in the pins for the buzzer. So if you have a buzzer, you can connect that now. And this one is the negative. We're gonna plug in, depending on how you do your receiver, it's going to be different. So whichever way you do follow, I use a PWM setup. So I'm going to plug that in now. Okay, so that's in. And that looks like it for that, for the connections on the top plate. For our step down, this is going to go to our VTX. So we'll feed that through there as well. And plug that in. The way I do the pins for the step down, I've put in 2 ports. So that one's going to the VTX, and then the one above it will wire in for an LED. But not on this build video, but it's there for that option. Okay, so we're ready to do some organizing of these wires so that it's going to sit nicely in this area, and then we can bring down the top plate. So I've cut heat shrink, and I'm going to slip them over these plugs. Because carbon fiber is conductive, if they make contact to any of these terminals here, it can be dangerous and things will blow up in smoke. So I've cut a piece of heat shrink. I'm going to fire up the heat gun, warm it in advance. That way you can just go in for a quick blast. Use your fingers to cinch off the ends there. See, just like that. Okay, and these become little slip covers. So when you need to program, you can take them off, and for protection, you can slip them back in. It's a good idea to get a big bag of zip ties because we go through quite a lot building mini quads. Okay, so when it's like to the point where you like it, use your snips. And I don't try to pull on these too much because it will damage the wire underneath, just enough to hold it in place. Okay, so we're ready to bring this down. It's not bad. It's not bad. I think it's pretty organized. The beauty of this system is when you need to do any work, you just pop it open like a hood of a car, and you can make any changes. You can check the plugs. We can add in the LEDs. It's a nice setup this way. So don't cut these wires really short. A lot of people go over the top and they have their own connector tips and they're going to make custom lengths. Really, doing this fashion, it looks organized, right? And some people will do them even shorter. You can if you like, but it's unnecessary. It's nicer to have that extra wire in case you need it. Okay. So let's get the hardware to fasten this down and let's move on to the next step. So we're moving on to finishing the clean frame.